I spent 30 years believing that unconditional love would be enough to secure my son's loyalty, but I never anticipated that the child I raised single-handedly would secretly take out $1 million life insurance policy on me and plan to stage my accidental drowning during our lakeside vacation. What my son didn't realize was that I had discovered everything 3 weeks earlier, and I was already executing a plan that would teach him the most profound lesson of his life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through my kitchen window, casting a warm glow across the granite countertops I'd installed just last year, part of the home renovation my son Ethan had surprisingly encouraged. I stood by the sink, washing the breakfast, dishes and planning my day when my phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Insurance review, 3 p.m. with Sarah Lewis. I frowned slightly, unable to recall scheduling this appointment. Curious, I called the number listed in the notification. The receptionist answered brightly, "Meridian Financial Planning. How may I help you?" "This is Margaret Collins," I said. "I seem to have an appointment with Sarah Lewis today, but I don't remember arranging it." A brief pause followed. "Let me check our system." "Yes, Ms. Collins, though our records show this was actually scheduled by your son Ethan. He mentioned he was helping you reorganize your insurance portfolios." I maintained my composure despite the confusion rising within me. "I see. And what exactly was this meeting regarding?" "A review of your life insurance policies," she replied. "According to our notes, your son indicated you were considering making changes to your beneficiary arrangements." "Thank you for clarifying," I said evenly. "I'll be there at 3. After hanging up, I sat slowly at my kitchen table, turning this information over in my mind. Ethan had always shown little interest in financial matters beyond requesting funds when his architectural firm was going through difficult periods. His sudden involvement with my insurance policies struck me as uncharacteristic, especially since we hadn't discussed any such changes. Rather than immediately calling him, I decided to attend the appointment. Perhaps there was a simple explanation, though the uneasy feeling in my stomach suggested otherwise. At Meridian Financial's sleek downtown office, Sarah Lewis greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Collins, it's lovely to meet you. Your son speaks very highly of you." "Does he?" I smiled, settling into a leather chair across from her desk. "Ethan and I have always been close." Sarah nodded, opening a folder. "As your son mentioned when he came in last week, you're interested in reviewing your current policies. I have everything here." "Actually," I said carefully, "I'd like to see what changes Ethan has been discussing with you first." A flicker of confusion crossed her face. "Oh, I assumed. Well, your son was quite specific about increasing your coverage substantially. He indicated you wanted to establish a new policy with him as the sole beneficiary, a $1.5 million term life plan with additional accidental death benefits." My heart constricted painfully, but decades of professional discipline kept my expression neutral. "I see. And did he complete any paperwork on my behalf?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "He provided your medical history and financial information for preliminary approval. The underwriting is nearly complete. We just need your signature to finalize everything." She slid several documents across the desk. "He mentioned you'd be taking a vacation to Lake Champlain next month. We can ensure coverage begins before your trip." The mention of our upcoming vacation sent a chill through me. Ethan had insisted on this trip, our first in years, claiming he wanted to reconnect after focusing so intensely on his struggling business. He'd even suggested activities, hiking the steeper trails, renting a small boat for fishing, swimming, in the more remote coves. "May I see the full application?" I asked, my voice remarkably steady despite the trembling that had started in my hands. For the next hour, I reviewed everything Ethan had submitted. He had provided detailed information about my health, finances, and daily routines, including my morning swims and the medication I occasionally took for mild anxiety. The policy included remarkably specific coverage for accidental drowning, falls from heights, and other misadventures that might occur during outdoor recreation. "Sarah," I said finally, "I'd like copies of everything, please." She looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Collins, I'm sensing there's been a misunderstanding. Should I contact your son to clarify?" "That won't be necessary," I replied, gathering the copies into my handbag. "And I'd appreciate your discretion regarding my visit today." During the drive home, memories flooded through my mind, snippets of conversations that suddenly took on sinister meaning. Ethan's recent interest in my swimming habits, his suggestion that we hike along the lake's highest ridges, his casual question about whether I still took Ativan before traveling. Small details that seemed innocuous in isolation, but formed a chilling pattern when viewed collectively. As I pulled into my driveway, grief and anger warred within me. I had raised Ethan alone after his father abandoned us when he was just 4 years old. I had worked 60-hour weeks as a hospital administrator to afford his private school education, covered the down payment on his first house, and loaned him $200,000 when his architectural firm faced bankruptcy last year, a loan he had yet to repay despite my own retirement approaching. Inside my home, the home where Ethan had taken his first steps, where I had nursed him through childhood illnesses and celebrated his achievements, I methodically reviewed our recent interactions, his increased attentiveness, his sudden nostalgia, his questions about my updated will. I recalled his most recent financial request just 2 weeks ago, another $50,000 for business expansion. I had gently declined, explaining that my retirement funds weren't infinite and suggesting he seek conventional financing. His expression had darkened momentarily before he'd composed himself. "I understand, Mom," he'd said, kissing my cheek. "You've done more than enough already." Standing in my living room, surrounded by family photographs chronicling our life, together, I faced a devastating reality. My only child viewed me as a financial resource rather than a person to cherish. When that resource began to set boundaries, he'd devised an alternative extraction method. The rational part of my mind suggested I should confront him immediately, perhaps even contact the authorities. But something deeper, something forged through 30 years of maternal instinct, held me back. Despite everything, this was my son. Before I determined how to proceed, I needed absolute certainty about his intentions. I made a simple decision that evening. Rather than exposing what I knew, I would create an opportunity for Ethan to reveal himself. I would proceed with our vacation plans while carefully observing his actions. I would give him the chance to choose a different path, while preparing for the possibility that he wouldn't. The next morning, I called Ethan and left a voicemail. "Sweetheart, I've been thinking about that business expansion you mentioned. Let's discuss it over dinner tonight. I might have a solution." He arrived promptly at 7, impeccably dressed and bearing an expensive bottle of my favorite wine. As we settled at the dining table with our meals, I noticed how carefully he studied my reactions, how attentively he listened to my words. "About that funding," I began casually, "I've reconsidered. I could liquidate some investments and transfer the money before our trip next month." His face brightened instantly. "That's wonderful news, Mom. I promise this is the last time I'll need to ask. The firm is so close to turning the corner." I smiled, noting how quickly his demeanor had transformed with the prospect of financial gain. "Consider it an advance on your inheritance," I said, watching his expression carefully. "After all, everything will be yours eventually." Something flickered in his eyes, calculation, perhaps anticipation. "I hope that's many years away," he replied smoothly. "Your support means everything to me." As dinner concluded, Ethan insisted on clearing the table. He returned from the kitchen with a glass of water, placing it before me with unusual attentiveness. "You seem tired, Mom," he observed. "Are you taking your vitamins? Staying hydrated? I worry about your health." I accepted the water with a grateful nod, pretending to sip while observing how intently he watched the glass. Later, after he departed, with promises to finalize our vacation plans, I carefully preserved the remaining water in a sealed container. That night, I sat alone in my study, the untouched water beside me, and began methodically planning my response to a betrayal so profound it had shattered my understanding of our relationship. The path ahead would require strength I wasn't certain I possessed, but as I contemplated alternatives, I recognized that this crisis demanded more than conventional wisdom could provide. What my son had underestimated wasn't my intelligence or my resources. What he had failed to recognize was more fundamental. The woman who had sacrificed everything to raise him was capable of extraordinary measures when necessary. If he had chosen to view our relationship as a transaction, I would ensure the final accounting reflected true justice. I opened my laptop and began my research, emotions set aside, focusing on the calculated response this situation demanded. By morning, I had developed not just a plan, but a philosophy to guide me through the darkness ahead. This wasn't merely about self-preservation. It was about creating a consequence profound enough to potentially redeem a soul I still couldn't help but love. The laboratory results arrived in my email 3 days later, sent through an encrypted link from Crestview Toxicology Services. I had paid a premium for expedited, confidential testing of the water sample, one of several precautionary measures I'd taken since discovering Ethan's insurance scheme. My hand hesitated over the mouse, cursor hovering above the link. Despite the mounting evidence, some part of me still hoped for an innocent explanation. Perhaps I had misinterpreted Ethan's intentions. Perhaps the insurance policy was merely poor judgment rather than malevolence. This report would eliminate that uncertainty, transforming suspicion into irrefutable fact. I clicked the link and entered my password. The clinical language of the report appeared on screen, but my eyes went immediately to the highlighted conclusion. Sample contains detectable levels of benzodiazepines, temazepam at concentration 2.5 mg/100 ml. Consumption could induce sedation, impaired coordination, and potential unconsciousness, particularly if combined with alcohol or other central nervous system depressants. My breath caught. Temazepam, a prescription sleep medication stronger than my occasional Ativan. I had never been prescribed this drug, nor did I keep it in my home. The concentration indicated deliberate addition rather than accidental contamination. Had I consumed the entire glass, I would have experienced profound drowsiness, potentially losing consciousness within 30 minutes. I closed the report and sat motionless at my desk, allowing the full weight of confirmation to settle through me. My son had attempted to drug me during a casual dinner conversation. This wasn't opportunistic exploitation. It was calculated, premeditated harm. The maternal instinct to protect Ethan, a reflex that had governed 3 decades of my existence, collided violently with the imperative to protect myself from him. The psychological dissonance was nearly unbearable. I found myself physically ill, barely reaching the bathroom before emptiness and grief emptied from my body in painful heaves. After regaining my composure, I reviewed the additional security measures I'd implemented since that dinner. New locks on all doors and windows, a discreet security system installed while Ethan was at work, a small safe for my medication, cameras, monitoring my home's exterior. I had taken practical precautions while maintaining a facade of normalcy in our interactions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Ethan had called twice since our dinner, each conversation revealing new dimensions of his deception. He'd mentioned researching boating companies at Lake Champlain, focusing on those that didn't require boating licenses or safety courses. He'd suggested we pack lightly for our hikes, discouraging the walking poles I typically used for stability on difficult terrain. With each recommendation, his intentions became more transparent. I needed to understand the full scope of his plans before our scheduled departure in 3 weeks. What had driven my son to this unthinkable course of action? Was financial desperation his only motivation, or had something fundamental in his character changed without my noticing? The following morning, I implemented the next phase of my information gathering. I contacted Meredith Wilson, an acquaintance whose private investigation firm had occasionally consulted for my hospital. Our conversation was brief and professional. I requested comprehensive surveillance of Ethan's activities, financial transactions, and communications, emphasizing the urgency and confidentiality required. "This is unusual, Margaret," Meredith noted carefully. "Family surveillance typically involves custody disputes or suspected infidelity, not mother-son relationships." "I understand," I replied, maintaining composure. "Let's just say I have reason to believe my son's business difficulties may have led to concerning decisions." 3 days later, Meredith delivered her preliminary findings in a secured folder. The contents confirmed my worst fears while revealing dimensions of Ethan's deception I hadn't anticipated. His architectural firm wasn't merely struggling, it had effectively ceased operations 6 months earlier. The office address he still referenced in conversations was now leased to a different company. His business partner had filed for personal bankruptcy, citing Ethan's mismanagement of company funds as a contributing factor. More disturbing were his personal financial activities. Ethan had accumulated over $300,000 in gambling debts at various online casinos. He had taken out 3 high-interest loans using his home as collateral. Most recently, he had contacted 3 different insurance brokers beyond Meridian Financial, apparently shopping for the most comprehensive accidental death policy he could secure on my life. The surveillance photos showed him meeting with a man identified as Marcus Delgado, a former swimming instructor with a suspended license due to safety violations. Their conversation, partially captured through long-distance audio recording, included discussion of lake currents, disorientation in open water, and response times for rural emergency services. I sat with this information for several hours, methodically processing its implications. The desperate financial circumstances explained Ethan's motivations, but the calculated nature of his planning revealed something far more disturbing than simple desperation. The son I thought I knew, the child I had taught to value honesty and compassion, had become capable of contemplating matricide for financial gain. That evening, as twilight settled over my garden, I reached a decision that transcended conventional wisdom. I would neither confront Ethan nor report him to authorities, at least not immediately. Either action would likely result in legal consequences that would irreparably destroy whatever humanity remained in him. Instead, I would create an opportunity for profound recognition, a controlled scenario where Ethan would be forced to confront the moral abyss he approached. This decision wasn't motivated by self-destructive maternal sacrifice, but by a clearer recognition. If Ethan succeeded in his plan, or if he were simply arrested before attempting it, he would remain fundamentally unchanged. He would view himself as either victorious or unlucky, rather than confronting the moral corruption his actions represented. I needed to craft an experience powerful enough to potentially redeem what remained of his humanity. Or, failing that, to ensure he could never harm anyone else if redemption proved impossible. The plan that formed in my mind was neither simple revenge nor passive acceptance. It would require precise timing, carefully managed appearances, and absolute control of my emotional responses. Most challenging would be maintaining authentic maternal warmth during our continued interactions while implementing countermeasures against his schemes. 2 days later, Ethan called to suggest dinner at his home, an unprecedented invitation, as he typically preferred meeting at restaurants or my house. "I want to cook for you for a change," he explained. "I've been taking those virtual culinary classes you gave me for Christmas. Time to show off my new skills." The transparent attempt to create another opportunity for drugging my food or drink would have been almost comical if not for its sinister intent. I accepted with enthusiasm, expressing delight at his thoughtfulness. His house, the elegant craftsman bungalow I had helped him purchase, showed signs of neglect that hadn't been present during my visit 3 months earlier. Mail had accumulated on the side table. Dust gathered on picture frames. The kitchen, however, was meticulously prepared, with ingredients arranged in precise order and an expensive bottle of Cabernet breathing beside 2 crystal glasses. "You've gone to such trouble," I remarked, watching as he carefully plated the grilled salmon. "Nothing but the best for you, Mom," he replied, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Why don't you pour the wine while I finish this?" I did as suggested, making a show of filling both glasses while ensuring mine received only a splash, hidden by the deep red liquid swirled against the crystal. Throughout dinner, I maintained animated conversation about our upcoming vacation while discreetly depositing food and wine into my napkin during his frequent trips to the kitchen. "I've been thinking about our Lake Champlain itinerary," he mentioned casually, returning with dessert. "There's a beautiful cove on the northern shore, very private, perfect for swimming without crowds. I thought we might boat out there early, one morning, catch the sunrise on the water." I nodded enthusiastically. "That sounds lovely. You know how I've always enjoyed morning swims." His expression softened with something resembling genuine affection, or perhaps satisfaction at my apparent cooperation with his designs. For a moment, I glimpsed the little boy who had once looked at me with unconditional love, before life's complications and his own moral weaknesses had corrupted our bond. That momentary glimpse strengthened rather than weakened my resolve. I wasn't fighting against my son, but for him, against whatever distortion had twisted his natural capacity for love into calculation and exploitation. My plan wasn't merely self-preservation, but an attempt, however unlikely to succeed, at reclamation of his humanity. As I drove home that evening, I finalized the remaining preparations for our trip. I would need to move quickly now, implementing the various elements I had quietly arranged over the past 2 weeks. Financial transfers, legal documents, strategic communications with carefully selected allies. My professional life had taught me that true leadership sometimes requires unconventional responses to unprecedented situations. The coming days would demand everything I had learned through decades of making difficult decisions under impossible circumstances. What Ethan didn't understand, what he couldn't possibly comprehend from his position of moral compromise, was that the woman he viewed as a financial asset to be liquidated possessed resources beyond money. Experience, wisdom, and a capacity for strategic thinking that came from navigating systems far more complex than his simple scheme. I pulled into my garage and activated the security system before entering my home. 3 suitcases waited in my hallway, packed not for Lake Champlain, but for the alternative journey I had designed. As I reviewed the final checklist of preparations, a strange calm settled over me. The certainty that comes from aligning action with deeper purpose rather than reactive emotion. Whatever happened in the coming days, I would face it with the same strength that had carried me through single parenthood, career challenges, and personal sacrifices. The maternal love that had defined my life hadn't diminished. It had evolved into something more profound than simple protection. True love sometimes requires creating consequences that enable growth, even when those consequences involve pain. I lifted the phone to make one final call, setting in motion the sequence of events that would either save my son's soul or ensure he could never threaten another life. The early morning sunlight filtered through my kitchen window as I methodically checked off the final items on my preparation list. 2 weeks remained before our scheduled trip to Lake Champlain, providing just enough time to implement the remaining elements of my plan. I had developed a comprehensive strategy that balanced personal safety with the opportunity for Ethan's potential redemption, a delicate equilibrium that required precise timing and flawless execution. My first step that morning was to visit First Meridian Bank, where I had maintained accounts for over 30 years. The branch manager, Robert Klein, greeted me personally, ushering me into his private office with the deference earned through decades of significant deposits and impeccable financial management. "Mrs. Collins, always a pleasure. What can we do for you today?" he asked, closing the door to ensure our privacy. "I need to make several specialized financial arrangements," I explained, opening the folder I had prepared. "Some involve immediate transfers. Others are time-dependent transactions that must execute according to a specific schedule." For the next hour, I established a series of carefully structured financial mechanisms. First, a new account with specific conditional access parameters. Second, a transfer reversing most of the recent funds I had provided to Ethan, though leaving enough to maintain the appearance of continued support. Third, a sophisticated escrow arrangement with triggered release conditions that would activate only under circumstances I precisely defined. "This is rather unusual," Robert noted diplomatically as he reviewed the documents. "Life occasionally presents unusual challenges," I replied evenly. "These arrangements simply ensure appropriate financial governance during a period of potential instability." After completing the banking transactions, I proceeded to the office of Eleanor Winters, the estate attorney who had managed my legal affairs since my appointment as hospital administrator 15 years earlier. I had scheduled this meeting weeks ago, before discovering Ethan's insurance scheme as part of standard retirement planning. The timing proved fortuitously convenient for my adjusted purposes. "I'd like to make several modifications to my existing will and establish additional legal instruments," I explained after our initial pleasantries concluded. "Some require immediate implementation. Others should remain inactive unless specific conditions occur." Eleanor, accustomed to the complex legal requirements of healthcare executives, asked precise professional questions as we worked through the documents. She raised a single eyebrow when reviewing certain provisions, but maintained professional discretion regarding their unusual nature. "These conditional clauses are quite specific," she observed. "Are you certain about the triggering circumstances?" "Absolutely certain," I confirmed. "I've considered the implications thoroughly." By mid-afternoon, I had established the legal framework necessary for my plan, documents that would remain dormant unless activated by specific events, yet would execute immediately if those conditions materialized. The provisions covered every contingency I could anticipate, from best-case scenarios to worst-case outcomes. My next appointment was with Dr. Thomas Chen, a toxicologist who had consulted for my hospital during several regulatory reviews. Our conversation was hypothetical, yet specific, covering the interactions between various sedatives, alcohol, and other substances that might affect cognitive function or physical coordination. I explained my interest as professional curiosity related to recent hospital safety protocols, a plausible explanation given my career history. "Fascinating questions, Margaret," Dr. Chen remarked as our consultation concluded, though rather specific for general protocol development. "Precision matters in patient safety," I responded with a professional smile. "Thank you for your expertise." That evening, Ethan called to confirm he had reserved our lakeside cabin and arranged boat rental for our vacation. His voice contained the careful enthusiasm of someone working to mask ulterior motives, a nuance I would have missed without awareness of his true intentions. "I've arranged everything, Mom," he said. "The cabin is quite private, just what we need for quality time together. And I've found a boating service that doesn't require all those tedious safety certifications." "That sounds wonderful," I replied, maintaining an appropriately appreciative tone. "I'm looking forward to our morning swims. The water is so peaceful at dawn." "Exactly what I was thinking," he agreed, a note of satisfaction evident in his voice. "Early mornings on the lake will be perfect." After ending the call, I completed the day's preparations by contacting 3 individuals whose roles would prove essential if my primary plan required support. First, Detective Sarah Morrison, who had consulted on hospital security matters during my tenure. Second, Dr. Eliza Jameson, a psychiatrist specializing in crisis intervention. Third, Jordan Tucker, a wilderness guide familiar with Lake Champlain's northern shores. I provided each with carefully calibrated information, enough to secure their assistance if needed, without revealing the full complexity of the situation. I established specific communication protocols, including check-in schedules and emergency response parameters. The following week proceeded with dual narratives operating simultaneously. On the surface, I maintained normal routines and preparations for our upcoming vacation. I purchased appropriate outdoor clothing, researched the lake's geography, and discussed our itinerary during occasional calls with Ethan. This visible preparation projected exactly the image he expected: an unsuspecting mother looking forward to quality time with her son. Beneath this facade, I implemented additional security measures and contingency plans. I installed a discreet GPS tracking device in my luggage. I arranged for satellite communication capabilities independent of cell networks. I practiced specific, physical techniques that might prove necessary in worst-case scenarios, drawing on the self-defense training I had taken years earlier after an attempted hospital robbery. Most challenging was maintaining authentic emotional engagement during interactions with Ethan. When he visited 3 days before our scheduled departure, bringing detailed maps of our planned hiking routes, I experienced a profound internal division. The mother in me still searched desperately for glimpses of the child I had raised, the boy who had once shown such promise, such capacity for kindness. The strategist in me analyzed his every word for additional insight into his plans. "These ridges provide amazing views of the lake," he explained, indicating elevated trails near our cabin. "They're a bit challenging, but I know how much you've always enjoyed a good hike." I noted how the routes he indicated traversed dangerous cliff edges and isolated areas with limited cellular reception. His planning had been methodical, identifying locations that maximized risk while minimizing potential for intervention or rescue. "They look perfect," I agreed, studying the topographical markers while mentally cataloging each hazard. "Though perhaps we should bring my walking poles for the steeper sections." "No need," he responded quickly. "I've arranged special walking tours where they provide equipment. Traveling light will make everything easier." Each such exchange confirmed both his intentions and his underestimation of my awareness, 2 factors essential to the plan I had developed. His confidence in my ignorance created precisely the opportunity I required for potential redemption. The evening before our departure, I completed my final preparations. I secured my home with additional measures designed to record any unauthorized entry during my absence. I confirmed all legal documents were properly executed and accessible to appropriate parties if necessary. I finalized the automated communications that would trigger under specific circumstances. Most importantly, I prepared the specialized items I would discreetly pack among my vacation supplies, ordinary objects modified for extraordinary purposes. A water bottle with a specialized internal chamber, hiking boots with compartmentalized soles, a jacket with custom-designed lining. Each modification served specific protective functions while maintaining normal appearance. As I completed these preparations, I experienced moments of profound clarity regarding my son and our relationship. The narrative I had maintained throughout his life, that unconditional love would naturally cultivate reciprocal affection and moral development, had proved insufficient. I had given completely without establishing the boundaries necessary for genuine character formation. My unwavering support, intended as nurturing foundation, had instead enabled progressive ethical deterioration. This recognition brought not only sadness but unexpected liberation. The path forward required neither blind maternal sacrifice nor complete emotional detachment. Instead, it demanded something more nuanced: compassionate accountability. I would create circumstances where Ethan must confront the consequences of his choices while maintaining the possibility of redemption through that confrontation. That night, I reviewed the comprehensive strategy I had developed. A plan with multiple contingencies, fail-safes, and decision points. Unlike Ethan's straightforward scheme focused on a single destructive outcome, my approach incorporated numerous potential paths, depending on his choices and responses. Each alternative included specific triggers, responses, and resolution mechanisms designed to maximize both safety and transformative potential. As I completed this final review, I experienced an unexpected emotional shift, a transition from devastation to determined purpose. The crisis Ethan had created through his betrayal had forced me to access capacities I might never have discovered otherwise. The strategic thinking developed through hospital administration, the crisis management skills honed through medical emergencies, the psychological insights gained through decades of leadership, all converged into a comprehensive response to this most personal challenge. I was no longer merely reacting to my son's betrayal, but actively creating an alternative future not defined by his destructive choices. The powerlessness I had initially felt upon discovering his plans had transformed into directed agency. I had developed a response that honored both my instinct for self-preservation and my enduring hope for his redemption. The pain remained. The profound grief of maternal betrayal cannot simply disappear through strategic planning. But alongside this pain emerged something unexpected: a deeper connection to my own wisdom, resourcefulness, and capacity for transformative action. As I packed the final items in my suitcase, I placed a framed photograph of Ethan as a child on top of my clothing. The image captured a moment of genuine joy, his 5th birthday, before complications had begun eroding our connection. I touched the glass briefly, acknowledging both what had been lost and what might still be reclaimed through the journey ahead. "Tomorrow," I whispered to the empty room. "We both face a reckoning neither of us anticipated." I closed the suitcase, set my alarm, and prepared for sleep, knowing the coming days would demand every resource I had cultivated throughout my life. The plan was in place. The preparations were complete. All that remained was implementation, and the uncertain outcome that would follow. The morning of our departure dawned with a clarity that seemed incongruous given the circumstances. I awoke before my alarm, watching golden light gradually illuminate my bedroom as I mentally reviewed each component of my plan. Today marked the transition from preparation to implementation, the point where theoretical strategy would encounter unpredictable reality. Ethan arrived precisely at 8, his silver SUV freshly washed, his manner exhibiting the forced casualness of someone working too hard to appear relaxed. He greeted me with a practiced smile as he loaded my luggage into the vehicle. "All set for our adventure, Mom?" he asked, his tone carefully calibrated between enthusiasm and nonchalance. "I've packed some snacks for the drive." "I'm looking forward to it," I replied, matching his apparent ease while noting the calculated attentiveness in his movements. "It's been too long since we've had quality time together." The 4-hour drive to Lake Champlain provided its own form of revelation. Conversation flowed with surprising naturalness, punctuated by comfortable silences as we passed through the changing landscape. If I hadn't discovered his intentions, I might have interpreted this journey as genuine reconnection, a thought that provoked both sadness and strengthened resolve. As we discussed neutral topics, architectural trends, recent films, local news, I observed subtle shifts in Ethan's demeanor when the conversation approached certain subjects. Any mention of my retirement plans caused momentary tension in his shoulders. References to future activities beyond our vacation elicited brief hesitations before his responses. These micro-expressions confirmed that his timeline for action was indeed this trip. He hadn't planned for my return. "I've been thinking about that lake house you've always wanted," he mentioned casually as we entered more rural terrain. "With your retirement approaching, maybe it's time to make that dream happen. We could look at properties while we're here." The suggestion was particularly calculated, establishing future-oriented conversations that would never materialize, while creating documentary evidence of my interest in lakefront property. I recognized the careful groundwork he was laying for potential investigation following my accident. "That's thoughtful of you," I responded warmly. "Though I've been reconsidering larger purchases until my financial situation stabilizes. Retirement planning creates its own uncertainties." A flicker of concern crossed his face, the first genuine emotion he'd displayed. "I thought everything was on solid ground with your pension and investments." "Generally, yes," I said lightly. "But I've made some recent adjustments worth discussing later in our trip. Nothing concerning, just prudent planning." This deliberately ambiguous statement served dual purposes, disrupting his assumptions about my financial status while establishing a reason for future serious conversation. The subtle shift in his expression confirmed its effectiveness, introducing an element of uncertainty into his carefully constructed plan. We arrived at our lakeside cabin shortly after noon. The property was exactly as advertised in the materials Ethan had shown me: private, scenic, and remarkably isolated. The rustic structure stood approximately 50 yards from the water's edge, nestled among tall pines that provided both shade and seclusion. A narrow dock extended into the clear blue water, with a small rental boat already secured at its end. "It's beautiful," I said genuinely, appreciating the location despite its selection for sinister purposes. "Much more private than I expected." "I wanted somewhere special," Ethan replied, unloading our luggage. "No distractions, no interruptions, just us and nature." The cabin's interior continued the theme of rustic isolation. A combined living and dining area with large windows overlooking the lake. A small but functional kitchen. 2 bedrooms with simple furnishings. The absence of nearby properties ensured complete privacy, a feature Ethan had undoubtedly prioritized during his selection process. "Why don't you settle in while I check on the boat?" he suggested. "Then we can have lunch on the deck." As he walked toward the dock, I quickly implemented the first active phase of my plan. I placed discrete monitoring devices in strategic locations throughout the cabin, miniature cameras in common areas, motion sensors near exterior doors, audio recorders in the kitchen and living room. Each device connected to secure cloud storage accessible through my encrypted phone application. I then prepared the specialized items I'd brought, ensuring each was properly positioned for potential activation. The weighted locator bracelet, disguised as a fitness tracker, went on my wrist. The emergency beacon remained hidden but accessible in my toiletry case. The specially designed water bottle with its separate sealed compartment was placed prominently on the kitchen counter. When Ethan returned, I was arranging sandwich materials on the counter, presenting the expected image of maternal domesticity. We ate on the deck overlooking the lake, discussing plans for the upcoming days with seemingly mutual enthusiasm. "I thought we'd start with an easy hike this afternoon," he suggested. "There's a beautiful trail that circles through the woods and offers amazing lake views. Then tomorrow morning we could take the boat out early for that sunrise swim you mentioned." "Perfect," I agreed, noting the accelerated timeline for water activities. Though I might need to take it slowly on the hike, my knee has been bothering me slightly. This minor deception served a specific purpose, establishing a plausible reason for potential physical limitations without triggering his suspicion. The slight frown that crossed his face suggested he was already recalculating specific aspects of his plan based on this new information. The afternoon hike revealed further dimensions of Ethan's preparation. The trail, while scenic, featured several sections with steep drops to rocky terrain below. He guided me toward outlooks with minimal safety barriers, suggesting photographic opportunities at the most precarious viewpoints. Each location provided potential for accidental falls that would appear tragically conventional to subsequent investigators. Throughout the hike, I maintained the delicate balance between apparent obliviousness and strategic awareness. I admired views from safer positions than he suggested. I declined certain photo opportunities with good-natured references to my mentioned knee discomfort. I stayed consistently beyond his immediate physical reach while maintaining conversational closeness. Most challenging was maintaining authentic maternal warmth, despite my awareness of his intentions. When he pointed out a particular bird species with genuine appreciation, I glimpsed momentary connection to the curious boy who had once collected nature guidebooks. When he steadied my arm during a rocky section of trail, his instinctive protectiveness briefly contradicted his larger design. These glimpses of his authentic self amid calculated performance only strengthened my commitment to the redemptive potential of my plan. We returned to the cabin as evening approached, the physical activity having established a natural reason for early retirement. As we prepared a simple dinner together, I implemented the next phase of my strategy, introducing elements that would disrupt his timeline without revealing my awareness. "I've been thinking about our boat excursion tomorrow," I mentioned casually while chopping vegetables. "I'd like to adjust my medication schedule before swimming. Would you mind if we delayed until mid-morning rather than sunrise?" This request served multiple purposes: postponing his planned timeline, establishing awareness of my medication use for potential investigation, and creating an opportunity to observe his reaction to disrupted plans. His hesitation was momentary but noticeable. "Of course," he agreed with recovered smoothness, "though the morning light on the water is spectacular." "We'll have other opportunities," I assured him. "The forecast shows good weather all week." After dinner, Ethan suggested a glass of wine on the deck. I accepted while implementing another prepared countermeasure, retrieving the specialized water bottle I'd positioned earlier. "I'll join you in a moment," I said. "Just need to take my evening supplements and bring some water. The wine tends to dehydrate me." In the kitchen, I activated the bottle's separate compartment feature, ensuring I could appear to drink anything he offered while actually consuming only the uncontaminated water from the sealed section. When I joined him on the deck, both wine and water bottle in hand, his attention fixed momentarily on my drinking habits, confirming my suspicions about potential evening tampering attempts. Our conversation that night revealed additional dimensions of his character I hadn't fully appreciated. As we discussed his architectural career, his descriptions of projects emphasized appearance over structural integrity, impression over substance. His anecdotes about client interactions focused on manipulation rather than service. Even his aesthetic preferences revealed prioritization of immediate impact over lasting value. I recognized how these qualities had developed incrementally throughout his life, small ethical compromises gradually expanding into fundamental character orientation. My own role in this development became increasingly clear. My unconditional support, intended as nurturing foundation, had instead enabled progressive detachment from consequence. My repeated financial rescues had established expectation rather than gratitude. This recognition brought not only sadness, but unexpected clarity regarding my responsibility in our current circumstances. The betrayal I faced wasn't simply Ethan's independent moral failure, but the culmination of relational patterns I had helped establish. This understanding didn't excuse his choices, but provided essential context for the redemptive approach I had designed. As evening deepened into night, I maintained careful monitoring of my wine glass and water consumption. Ethan made 2 separate suggestions that I finish my wine, attempts I deflected with natural references to tiredness and tomorrow's activities. When he finally proposed turning in for the night, his casual glance at my partially consumed wine revealed disappointment. quickly masked with practiced affection. "Sleep well, Mom," he said, embracing me briefly. "Tomorrow will be a perfect day on the lake." In my bedroom, I activated the remaining security measures I had prepared. The motion detector positioned to alert me of any nighttime entry. The door wedge silently placed to prevent easy access. The secondary communication device hidden within reach of my bed, providing satellite connection independent of cellular networks. As I prepared for sleep, I reviewed the day's observations and adjusted my strategy accordingly. Ethan's plan appeared to involve multiple potential accident scenarios rather than a single approach, flexibility that demonstrated greater calculation than I had initially assessed. His adaptability would require corresponding adjustments to my countermeasures. Most significantly, I had confirmed the fundamental ambivalence within him, the coexistence of genuine affection alongside destructive intention. This psychological complexity reinforced my conviction regarding the redemptive potential of my plan. Beneath the calculated performance remained fragments of authentic connection, suggesting possibility for restoration if confronted with suitable catalyst for moral recognition. I verified all monitoring systems were functioning properly, positioned emergency resources within immediate reach, and finally allowed myself to rest. Tomorrow would likely bring escalation of both his attempts and my countermeasures. The next stage in this unprecedented psychological and strategic engagement between mother and son. What kept me centered amid these extraordinary circumstances wasn't fear or vengeful intention, but clarity of purpose that transcended both. I sought neither simple self-preservation nor punishment, but transformation, creating circumstances where genuine recognition might catalyze redemption. This clarity provided unexpected strength as I navigated this most painful journey of maternal love. I woke before dawn, the lake mist visible through my window as pale blue light gradually illuminated the water. My sleep had been surprisingly deep, the clarity of purpose providing a foundation of calm despite the circumstances. I performed a quick check of my monitoring devices, confirming no nighttime disturbances or entry attempts. All systems remained operational, all countermeasures in place. By the time I emerged from my room, Ethan had already prepared coffee and a simple breakfast of yogurt and fresh berries. His manner projected relaxed enthusiasm, though I noted subtle signs of tension, a tightness around his eyes, a slightly excessive precision in his movements. "Good morning," he greeted me, pouring coffee into a mug emblazoned with the rental company's logo. "Sleep well?" "Surprisingly so," I replied truthfully. Something about the lake air. We ate on the deck, watching the last wisps of morning fog dissipate across the water's surface. The conversation remained casual. Observations about local wildlife, commentary on the cabin's rustic architecture, plans for the day ahead. Yet underneath this ordinary exchange, I sensed increasing determination in Ethan's manner, a barely perceptible intensification suggesting accelerated timeline. "I was thinking," he said with practiced casualness, "why wait until mid-morning for our boat trip? The water is perfect right now and the early light is spectacular. Your medication adjustment could wait until later, couldn't it?" The subtle pressure confirmed my assessment. My request to delay the water excursion had disrupted his planning, creating anxiety he was now attempting to resolve through gentle manipulation. The accelerated timeline suggested contingency plans being abandoned in favor of primary approach, a tactical shift revealing both determination and potential impulsivity. "Actually, I took my adjusted dose when I first woke up," I responded, introducing a calculated ambiguity about my medication status. "So we could certainly go earlier if you'd like." Relief flickered across his features, confirmation that water activities represented his preferred scenario. "Great. I'll clean up here while you get ready." As he gathered breakfast dishes, I returned to my room to implement water-specific countermeasures. I activated the waterproof tracking device concealed in my specially designed swimsuit, I secured the emergency flotation device disguised as an ordinary fitness belt. I exchanged my standard medical alert bracelet for the weighted locator version that would broadcast my position even underwater. Most crucially, I activated the satellite communication link that would transmit real-time biometric data and location information to my pre-established security protocols. This system would automatically alert designated contacts if specific vital sign parameters were breached or unusual movement patterns detected. When I emerged in appropriate attire for boating and potential swimming, Ethan had already transferred several items to the small vessel docked at the end of the pier: a cooler, towels, a waterproof bag containing unspecified contents. His efficiency in preparation further confirmed the significance of this excursion in his overall plan. I packed some water and snacks, he explained, helping me into the boat with exaggerated care. Thought we might explore the northern cove I mentioned. It's about 20 minutes away by boat. The location he identified matched information from my research: a secluded area with minimal boat traffic, significant depth variations, and natural features that could complicate rescue operations. The selection demonstrated thorough planning rather than opportunistic improvisation. As we pulled away from the dock, I maintained careful positional awareness, noting distances, observing Ethan's placement relative to mine, identifying potential exit points from the vessel if necessary. The small outboard motor propelled us smoothly across the lake's surface, creating sufficient ambient noise to partially mask conversation. Ethan navigated with surprising competence, suggesting previous experience he had never mentioned. His attention alternated between the lake ahead and my positioning in the boat, calculations visibly processing behind his focused expression. When he offered me a bottled water from the cooler, I accepted while implementing my substitution protocol, appearing to drink while actually releasing the liquid alongside the boat during a natural movement adjustment. "Beautiful morning," I observed, genuinely appreciating the landscape despite the circumstances. Mist-covered mountains framed the expansive lake, their reflection creating perfect symmetry on the calm water. Early sunlight illuminated isolated patches with golden intensity while leaving other areas in cool shadow. "I can see why you chose this location. I wanted this trip to be special," he replied, his tone containing layers of meaning beyond the surface sentiment. "Something we'd both remember." After 20 minutes, the shoreline curved into the secluded cove he had described. Steep, rocky formations created natural walls on 3 sides, with water depth significantly greater than the main lake area. No other boats were visible, no cabins perceptible along the forested shore. The isolation was both magnificent and strategically concerning. "This is perfect," Ethan declared, cutting the motor and allowing the boat to drift toward the center of the cove. "Complete privacy for your morning swim." The directness of his suggestion confirmed acceleration of his timeline. Rather than the gradual approach I had anticipated, he was moving directly to implementation. Perhaps concerned about my earlier medication comments, or detecting something in my manner that triggered urgency. "The water looks wonderful," I agreed, maintaining calm engagement while activating additional alert protocols through subtle wristband interaction. Though perhaps quite cold this early. "Best to dive right in," he encouraged, moving to retrieve something from the waterproof bag, an action I monitored peripherally while pretending to admire the scenery. The temperature is perfect once you're fully immersed. The item he removed appeared to be a specialized diving weight belt, equipment unnecessary for recreational swimming, but highly effective for ensuring underwater descent. This concrete confirmation of lethal intent triggered immediate physiological response I needed to control, maintaining external composure while implementing heightened security protocols. "I thought I'd use this for diving to explore the rock formations," he explained, noticing my observation of the equipment. "But you should definitely get in first. Acclimate to the water while I get ready." His positioning had subtly shifted, placing himself between me and the motor controls, while maintaining conversational distance. The strategic placement confirmed imminent action rather than continued preparation. The moment of implementation had arrived more quickly than anticipated. In my scenario planning, rather than displaying alarm or confrontation, I utilized the psychological principle of pattern interruption, introducing an unexpected element that would temporarily disrupt his action sequence while maintaining apparent ignorance of his intentions. "Before I swim, there's something important we need to discuss," I said, my tone shifting to gentle seriousness. "Something I've been meaning to talk with you about since before this trip." The sudden context change created visible recalibration in his expression, momentary uncertainty interrupting his prepared sequence. "Can it wait until after your swim? The water's perfect right now." "It actually relates to swimming," I continued, maintaining the interruption while subtly shifting my position for improved safety. Or rather, to what swimming has always represented in our family. His confusion intensified, the weight belt still held awkwardly in his hands. "I don't understand." "Your father was a competitive swimmer," I said, introducing information I had never previously shared. "Something I've never told you because the circumstances were complicated. He didn't simply abandon us. He died during a night training swim when you were 3 years old." The fabricated history served multiple tactical purposes, creating emotional disruption, introducing uncertainty about my knowledge, and establishing plausible connection to current circumstances that demanded immediate attention rather than dismissal. Ethan's prepared sequence completely derailed, his expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and reluctant engagement. "Why would you keep something like that from me? Why tell me now?" "Because I see him in you sometimes," I continued. "The emotional authenticity of maternal observation, providing credibility to the fabricated history, especially in your determination. It frightened me for years, seeing those similarities. That's why I've always been so protective, so quick, to provide safety nets." The psychological impact was immediately apparent. His grip on the weight belt loosened as cognitive resources diverted to processing this unexpected narrative. The immediate threat temporarily deferred, I continued the strategic engagement while surreptitiously activating additional security measures. "I have something of his I've kept all these years," I said, reaching slowly for my small waterproof bag. "Something I thought you should finally have." The movement provided natural opportunity to shift position while maintaining his attention on the narrative rather than my tactical adjustments. From the bag, I removed a sealed envelope, part of my prepared countermeasure materials, containing documents that would become relevant in subsequent phases. "His final letter," I explained, holding the envelope without immediately extending it. "Written the day before his accident. I've never had the courage to share it until now." The psychological engagement had successfully disrupted his immediate action plan, creating space for implementation of my next strategic phase. His attention now fixed on the unexpected narrative and mysterious envelope, cognitive resources diverted from his original intention. "I don't understand why you'd keep this from me my entire life," he said, the weight belt now hanging loosely from one hand, his positioning relaxed from its previous tactical arrangement. "Why bring it up now, here?" "Because I've finally realized that protecting you from difficult truths hasn't served either of us," I replied, the statement containing genuine insight despite its contextual fabrication. "And because water has always represented both life and danger in our family history." This cryptic connection between past and present created further cognitive engagement, extending the interruption of his action sequence while I continued subtle implementation of security measures. The strategic redirection had temporarily neutralized immediate threat while establishing foundation for the next phase of intervention. What Ethan couldn't recognize in this moment was how the fabricated narrative paralleled our actual circumstances. A story of hidden truths, water-related danger, and parent-child relationships distorted by protection and deception. The resonance between fiction and reality created psychological opening that might yet enable genuine recognition beyond mere tactical disruption. In this suspended moment, the boat drifting slowly in the secluded cove, Ethan's original intention, temporarily derailed, my countermeasures discreetly activated, I maintained both tactical awareness and deeper purpose. Beyond immediate safety lay the possibility for fundamental recognition, the potential catalyst for redemption that had motivated my elaborate response to his betrayal. Whether that potential would materialize remained uncertain, but I had successfully navigated the most immediately dangerous phase of our engagement, creating space for the more transformative elements of my plan to unfold. The next moments would reveal whether my son could recognize the parallel between the fictional father in my story and his own moral descent, whether the reflection might catalyze the self-awareness necessary for genuine change. The sealed envelope weighed in my hand like a physical manifestation of the moral gravity between us. Ethan stared at it, the weight belt now hanging loosely at his side, momentarily forgotten as his mind processed this unexpected narrative disruption. The boat drifted gently in the secluded cove, morning sunlight creating dappled patterns across the water's surface. I should have shared this with you years ago, I continued, maintaining the psychological engagement while carefully monitoring his physical positioning. But I convinced myself that protecting you from painful truths was an act of love rather than fear. Ethan's expression cycled through confusion, suspicion, and reluctant curiosity. The tactical disruption had successfully interrupted his immediate intentions, but I recognized the temporary nature of this intervention. Sustainable redirection required deeper engagement with the core issues underlying his betrayal. "May I see it?" he asked finally, gesturing toward the envelope. "Before I give you this," I replied, "I need you to understand something important. This letter reveals truths about choices and consequences, about how single decisions can permanently alter lives." This framing established essential context for the actual contents of the envelope, documents I had carefully prepared as part of my comprehensive strategy. The parallel between my fictional narrative and our present reality created psychological resonance that might facilitate genuine recognition beyond mere tactical diversion. "Just give me the letter, Mom," Ethan said, impatience edging into his voice as he extended his hand across the narrow space between us. I passed him the sealed envelope, observing how his fingers trembled slightly, revealing emotional engagement despite his attempted control. As he broke the seal and removed the contents, his expression shifted from anticipation to confusion, then to unmistakable shock. The envelope contained not a fictional father's letter, but copies of specific documents. His life insurance policy application with my name listed, transcripts of his recorded conversation with Marcus Delgado discussing accidental drowning, financial records showing his gambling debts, and laboratory results confirming temazepam in the water sample from our dinner. "What is this?" he whispered, though the pallor spreading across his face confirmed he knew exactly what he was seeing. "The truth," I replied simply. "Not about a fictional father, but about a very real son." His shocked gaze lifted from the documents to meet mine. For perhaps the first time in years, I saw him without performance or calculation, raw, exposed, trapped in a moment of unavoidable recognition. You knew all along?" "I discovered your insurance policy 3 weeks ago," I confirmed. "Everything else followed from that initial revelation." "This is insane," he stammered, attempting to reassemble his composure. "These papers, they're taken out of context. I can explain." "There's no context that justifies planning your mother's death, Ethan." The direct confrontation silenced his nascent denials. For several moments, only the gentle lapping of water against the boat filled the silence between us. His fingers still gripped the incriminating documents, physical evidence he couldn't rationalize, away. "So this whole trip," he said finally. You were just, what, setting me up? I was giving you an opportunity, I corrected, my voice remaining calm despite the profound weight of the moment. An opportunity to face yourself honestly, perhaps for the first time. Ethan's expression hardened, emotional exposure retreating. Behind defensive anger. By tricking me? By recording private conversations and collecting evidence against me? That's your idea of maternal love? Love sometimes requires creating consequences that enable growth, I replied, even when those consequences involve pain. His laugh held no humor, only bitterness. So what happens now? You turn these documents over to the police? Have your only son arrested for attempted murder? That depends entirely on what happens. In the next hour, I said, introducing the pivot point of my entire strategy, on whether you're capable of genuine recognition beyond self-preservation. This statement shifted our interaction from exposure to potential transformation, the central purpose behind my elaborate response to his betrayal. The confrontation wasn't merely about accountability, but about creating space for fundamental, moral reckoning that might yet redeem what remained of his humanity. Recognition of what? He asked, wariness replacing anger in his expression. Of the person you've become, I said, and of the choice you now face regarding who you might yet be. I reached into my bag and removed a second envelope, this one containing the legal documents I had prepared with Eleanor Winters. The comprehensive contingency plan accounting for multiple potential outcomes of this confrontation. This contains several legal instruments that determine our future relationship, I explained. Financial arrangements, inheritance structures, and potential criminal evidence either to be submitted or destroyed, depending on specific conditions. His eyes narrowed. What conditions? Complete honesty, I replied simply. Beginning with why. Not the financial pressures or gambling debts. I already understand those practical motivations. What I need to hear is how my son, the child I raised, supported, and loved unconditionally, became capable of planning his mother's death. The directness of the question created visible impact, penetrating defensive layers to reach something more fundamental. For the first time, I glimpsed genuine shame beneath his calculated exterior. I never, he began, then stopped, recognition dawning that further deception was pointless. It wasn't about you specifically. I just needed to solve your financial problems, I completed when he faltered. But that explains what, not how. Not the moral dissent required to transform financial desperation into matricide. The word hung between us, its stark reality impossible to soften or rationalize. Ethan flinched visibly, perhaps truly confronting the nature of his intentions for the first time. It started small, he said finally, gaze dropping to the boat floor. Taking client deposits for personal use, promising work I couldn't deliver, then gambling to try recovering those funds before anyone noticed. Each step made the next one easier, crossing lines that seemed uncrossable until suddenly they weren't. This initial honesty, however reluctant, represented the first essential step toward potential redemption. Acknowledging the progressive nature of moral compromise, how incremental ethical failures accumulate into fundamental character distortion. And what about me? I asked quietly. How did you rationalize that specific betrayal? He remained silent for long moments, the weight belt now discarded on the boat floor between us, a concrete reminder of intentions now impossible to deny. You became a concept rather than a person, he admitted finally. A financial solution. Rather than my mother, I convinced myself you'd lived a full life, that your resources would serve better purpose solving my problems than funding your retirement. The clinical detachment in this explanation revealed more than elaborate justification would have, the fundamental dehumanization required for such betrayal. Yet his ability to articulate this process suggested potential for recognition beyond it. "When did I stop being real to you, Ethan?" I asked, the question penetrating deeper than accusation could have. "At what point did the woman who raised you, who sacrificed for your education, who supported your every ambition, become merely a resource to be liquidated?" His breathing had become irregular, emotional control visibly deteriorating as layers of rationalization collapsed under direct confrontation. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't recognize myself anymore." This admission, however partial, created opening for the next phase of potential transformation. Beyond exposure and acknowledgement lay the possibility of genuine remorse, not merely regret at being caught, but recognition of fundamental violation of human connection. "The documents in this second envelope," I explained, "contain two possible futures. The first involves full legal accountability, evidence submitted to authorities, financial restitution, likely criminal charges. The second offers opportunity for rehabilitation, structured redemption requiring extensive therapeutic intervention, financial restructuring, and supervised restoration." His head lifted, hope and wariness competing in his expression. "You'd give me a second chance? After everything you've discovered?" "Not give," I clarified. "Offer the opportunity to earn through demonstrable transformation rather than promises or performance." This distinction represented the essential lesson absent from our previous relationship, the difference between enabling dependency and supporting genuine growth. The unconditional love that had inadvertently facilitated his moral decline would be replaced by compassionate accountability that might enable authentic development. "The choice is fundamentally yours," I continued, "but it requires complete commitment to whichever path you select. Partial engagement or attempted manipulation will automatically trigger the accountability option." The comprehensive nature of this framework created boundaries previously absent from our relationship. Clear consequences directly linked to specific behaviors rather than emotional manipulation or maternal capitulation. Ethan's gaze returned to the incriminating document still clutched in his hand. "How could you possibly trust me after discovering this? How could you offer redemption instead of punishment?" "Because despite everything," I replied with simple truth, "I still see the capacity for growth beneath the distortions, and because transformative justice offers possibility beyond mere punishment." This perspective didn't represent naive forgiveness, but strategic hope, recognition that genuine rehabilitation serves broader purpose than retribution alone. The approach focused not on past betrayal, but on potential future development currently, obscured by accumulated moral compromise. "I don't deserve your compassion," he said, voice barely audible above the gentle lapping of water against the boat. "This isn't about deserving," I responded. "It's about possibility, about who you might yet become if genuinely committed to transformation." In this moment of vulnerability, his deceptions exposed, his intentions revealed, his rationalizations dismantled, I witnessed the first authentic response beneath years of calculated performance, not polished remorse designed to manipulate, but raw recognition of his own moral deterioration. "I don't know if I can change," he admitted, meeting my gaze directly for perhaps the first time since childhood. Without performance or agenda, simply human uncertainty facing overwhelming moral reckoning. "That's the first honest thing you've said in years," I observed, "and the necessary starting point for any meaningful transformation." As morning light filled the secluded cove, illuminating both the beauty of our surroundings and the stark reality between us, something shifted in our fundamental relationship. Not reconciliation or resolution, but possibility. The opening of potential pathway beyond betrayal and defense towards something neither of us could yet fully envision. Whether Ethan would ultimately choose accountability or attempted redemption remained uncertain, But the controlled confrontation had achieved its essential purpose, creating space where genuine recognition became possible beyond manipulation or performance. The journey ahead would be neither simple nor guaranteed, but the first essential step had occurred in this isolated moment of unavoidable truth. For several minutes, the only sounds between us were the gentle ripples against the boat and distant calls of morning birds echoing across the water. Ethan sat motionless, the incriminating documents still clutched in his hands, his gaze alternating between them and the second envelope I held, the one containing potential futures neither of us could fully predict. "How would it work?" he finally asked, his voice stripped of its usual confidence. "This rehabilitation option." I recognized the critical nature of this moment. His question represented neither commitment nor rejection, but genuine inquiry into possibility beyond our current reality. My response needed to offer concrete structure without minimizing the significant challenges such a path would entail. "It would begin with comprehensive intervention," I explained, maintaining steady eye contact. "Inpatient treatment addressing both the gambling addiction and the underlying patterns that facilitated moral compromise. Not a luxury retreat, but genuine therapeutic engagement with qualified specialists in both addiction and ethical rehabilitation." His jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't interrupt or dismiss the requirements, the first indication of potential receptivity beyond self-preservation. "Following residential treatment, you would enter a structured accountability program I've arranged through Dr. Eliza Jameson. Weekly therapy, regular monitoring, community service focusing specifically on elder protection and financial abuse prevention. Your architectural license would remain suspended until program completion and professional ethics certification." "How long?" he asked, the question containing multiple layers: duration of intervention, timeline for potential restoration, measurement of genuine change. "The initial residential phase would require minimum 90 days, I replied. "The subsequent structured accountability program extends at least 18 months, with continuation dependent on demonstrable progress rather than time served." He exhaled slowly, calculation visibly shifting toward genuine consideration. "And financially? All gambling debts would be addressed through structured repayment rather than immediate bailout. Your home would be placed in protected trust, preventing liquidation for gambling funds while ensuring stability during rehabilitation. Monthly living stipend sufficient for necessities but requiring careful budgeting. Complete financial transparency through monitored accounts until demonstrated stability." The comprehensive nature of these requirements clearly exceeded the token compliance or minimal engagement he might have anticipated. This wasn't symbolic penance, but fundamental restructuring designed to address root causes rather than merely punitive consequences. "And what about us?" he asked, the question emerging with unexpected vulnerability. "Our relationship?" This represented the most complex dimension of potential rehabilitation. Not financial restructuring or therapeutic intervention, but restoration of fundamental trust, damaged beyond simple repair. "That requires longest timeline," I acknowledged. Honestly. "We would begin with structured, supervised interaction during your treatment phase, gradually transitioning to independent relationship governed by clearly established boundaries and expectations. Restoration of trust would develop through demonstrated consistency rather than declarations or promises." Ethan's gaze shifted to the water surrounding our small boat, the vastness perhaps reflecting the magnitude of transformation being discussed. When he looked back, something had shifted in his expression, calculation giving way to something approaching genuine deliberation. "And the alternative?" he asked quietly. "The accountability option?" "Full disclosure to authorities," I stated without emotional manipulation. "Submission of all evidence including recorded conversations, financial documentation, and attempted poisoning analysis. I've prepared comprehensive materials with Detective Sarah Morrison that would likely result in charges including attempted murder, insurance fraud, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. His face paled, the concrete reality of potential consequences perhaps fully registering for the first time. That would destroy my entire life. Your actions created that potential consequence, I replied evenly. I'm simply ensuring it manifests. If rehabilitation isn't genuinely embraced, this clarity, compassionate yet uncompromising, established essential foundation for any potential transformation. The path forward wouldn't involve emotional manipulation, maternal rescue, or consequences, disconnected from actions. Whatever choice Ethan made would carry full weight of its natural repercussions. He placed the documents carefully on the seat beside him, his movements deliberate as though physically processing the weight of the decision before him. How do I know you won't submit the evidence anyway? What guarantee do I have? The same guarantee I have regarding your commitment to rehabilitation, I responded. None beyond demonstrated action and developed trust. This uncertainty represents necessary element of authentic transformation, moving beyond contractual compliance toward genuine relationship. This framework established equity previously absent from our interactions, mutual vulnerability requiring commitment from both parties rather than unilateral maternal sacrifice. The approach created potential for authentic development, rather than performance designed to acquire specific outcomes. Ethan's gaze returned to the weight belt lying forgotten on the boat floor, concrete reminder of intentions now impossible to deny or rationalize away. The juxtaposition between this physical evidence of his planned harm and the opportunity for rehabilitation created stark illustration of the choice before him. I don't deserve this chance, he said finally, the statement containing first recognition of actions disconnected from entitlement. Transformation isn't about deserving, I replied. It's about possibility beyond current limitations, about creating opportunity for something different to emerge from present reality. The perspective shifted focus from judgment about past actions toward potential future development, from static character assessment toward dynamic process engaging capacity for growth. This orientation created space for genuine choice beyond reactive shame or defensive justification. Ethan's breathing had steadied, initial shock transforming into deeper consideration. Something shifted in his posture, the calculated performance that had characterized our recent interactions giving way to more authentic presence within this unprecedented moment. I need to understand something first, he said, meeting my gaze directly. When did you know? How long have you been planning? This? The question revealed emerging recognition beyond immediate self-concern, curiosity about perspective, outside his own experience. This represented small but significant step toward empathic capacity previously dormant in our interactions. I discovered the insurance policy 3 weeks ago, I explained. Everything else followed from that initial revelation, the investigator's findings, the toxicology report, the recorded conversations with Marcus Delgado. His expression registered surprise at the comprehensive nature of my response. You've been living with this knowledge for weeks while continuing normal interactions? The question contained dawning awareness of emotional reality beyond his own experience, recognition of maternal pain his actions had generated. This empathic, stirring however limited, suggested potential beyond purely self-interested calculation. I needed to create opportunity for authentic choice rather than reactive consequences, I explained. That required comprehensive understanding and strategic response beyond immediate confrontation. Something in this explanation resonated beyond intellectual comprehension, perhaps recognition of care embedded within accountability, rather than simple punitive reaction. Ethan's expression reflected complexity beyond binary categorization as either victim or villain in this unfolding narrative. Why didn't you just report everything immediately? He asked, the question containing genuine curiosity rather than tactical assessment. Most people would have gone straight to police with evidence like this. Because punishment alone creates neither healing nor transformation, I replied simply. And because despite everything, I still see capacity within you for something beyond current limitations. This perspective represented neither naive forgiveness nor denial of legitimate consequences, but strategic hope focused on potential development rather than retributive satisfaction. The approach prioritized transformative possibility over punitive certainty, creating space for emergent growth beyond established patterns. Ethan's gaze returned to the documents beside him, then lifted toward the surrounding landscape. Dawn fully emerged now, illuminating the secluded cove with clarity that seemed to parallel our conversation. Something in his expression suggested internal reaching toward possibility previously unimagined within his calculated worldview. "If I choose rehabilitation," he said finally, "what happens right now? Today?" The question indicated shift from abstract consideration toward concrete implementation, necessary transition for genuine commitment beyond temporary compliance, motivated by immediate circumstances. "We return to shore," I replied, outlining immediate sequence rather than distant outcomes. "You contact your business partner to arrange extended absence. We drive directly to Lakeside Recovery Center, where intake has been arranged contingent on your voluntary commitment. Immediate separation from enabling environments, beginning therapeutic process under qualified supervision." The structured immediacy of this response established clear pathway rather than ambiguous intention. Concrete steps requiring definitive action rather than conceptual agreement. This framework created substantive choice rather than symbolic gesture, requiring genuine commitment beyond verbal assurance. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, perhaps visualizing these immediate implications: the decisive break with established patterns, the surrender of autonomy required for genuine intervention, the concrete manifestation of abstract rehabilitation. When he opened his eyes, something had shifted in his expression. Calculation giving way to tentative resolution, performance replaced by nascent authenticity. He reached down slowly, lifting the weight belt from the boat floor, tangible embodiment of intentions now fully confronted rather than denied. "I need to throw this away," he said quietly, the simple statement containing recognition beyond mere disposal of physical evidence. I nodded, understanding the symbolic significance beyond practical necessity. With deliberate movement, he cast the weight belt over the side of the boat, watching as it disappeared into the lake's depths, physical manifestation of decision emerging within this unprecedented moment. "I want to try," he said finally, voice containing neither performance nor manipulation, but uncertain commitment to possibility beyond present limitations. "I don't know if I can change everything, but I want to try the rehabilitation option." The statement represented neither guaranteed transformation nor complete redemption, but essential first step beyond entrenched patterns, genuine reaching toward potential development previously unimagined within his calculated worldview. "That choice opens possibility previously unavailable," I acknowledged, neither celebrating prematurely nor dismissing genuine significance of this initial commitment. "The path forward requires consistent demonstration beyond today's decision." Ethan nodded slowly, recognition dawning that this moment represented beginning rather than completion. First step in extended journey rather than immediate resolution of consequences generated through progressive moral compromise. "Can we go back now?" he asked simply. "I need to make those calls. Start this process before I lose courage." As I started the boat's motor and turned us toward the main shoreline, something shifted in the quality of silence between us. Neither comfortable reconciliation nor hostile separation, but tentative opening toward possibility neither of us could fully envision from our current vantage point. Whether this initial commitment would ultimately manifest as sustained transformation remained uncertain. The journey ahead would require resources neither of us could accurately assess in this moment of initial decision. But something had fundamentally changed in our relationship, calculation giving way to potential authenticity, performance replaced. By nascent recognition, entitlement transformed into tentative accountability. As our small boat cut through morning-lit waters, I recognized that genuine transformation rarely follows predictable trajectories. The path ahead would likely include setbacks, resistance, and moments of doubt alongside potential progress. But this uncertain journey offered possibility beyond the tragic conclusion Ethan had originally envisioned, opening toward potential development neither of us could fully anticipate from within this pivotal moment of initial choice. The drive to Lakeside Recovery Center unfolded in contemplative silence. As I navigated the winding roads away from the cabin, Ethan sat beside me, his posture revealing the weight of his decision. He had made the necessary calls from the dock, a brief, tense conversation with his business partner, followed by cancellation of our cabin rental. Each call represented another step away from his carefully constructed plans and toward an uncertain future he had never envisioned for himself. The treatment facility appeared after an hour's drive, a cluster of modern buildings nestled among mature pines, their large windows reflecting the surrounding forest. The understated sign at the entrance conveyed professional dignity rather than resort ambiance. This was a place of serious work, not comfortable retreat. As we pulled into the parking area, Ethan's breathing quickened noticeably. I didn't expect to feel this. Terrified, he admitted, his voice barely audible. Fear often accompanies genuine change, I observed. It suggests you recognize the significance of this step. He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the main entrance. What if I fail? What if I can't change fundamentally enough? The question contained both vulnerability and insight, recognition that superficial compliance would prove insufficient for genuine transformation. This awareness itself represented significant evolution from his previous performance-oriented approach to challenges. Transformation isn't binary success or failure, I replied. It's ongoing process requiring commitment to direction rather than guaranteed destination. Each step creates possibility for subsequent development previously unavailable. This perspective shifted focus from overwhelming totality toward manageable increments, from abstract perfection toward concrete progress. Ethan's slight relaxation suggested the framing offered psychological accessibility beyond paralyzing expectation. At the reception desk, we were greeted by Dr. Miranda Chen, the facility's clinical director. Her professional warmth balanced compassion with clear boundaries, exactly the approach required for Ethan's circumstance. Mr. Collins, she acknowledged with direct eye contact. I understand you're voluntarily seeking treatment for gambling addiction and associated behavioral patterns. Her framing immediately established critical context, both the specific addiction requiring intervention and the broader patterns that had facilitated progressive moral compromise. This dual focus would prove essential for addressing root causes, rather than merely symptomatic behaviors. Yes, Ethan confirmed, his voice steadier than I had anticipated. I need comprehensive help. Dr. Chen nodded, neither effusive with praise nor dismissive of the commitment this acknowledgement represented. The intake process takes approximately 2 hours. We'll need to conduct initial assessments, review facility protocols, and establish preliminary treatment objectives. She turned toward me with professional courtesy. Mrs. Collins, we have a family waiting area where you may remain during this process. Alternatively, we can contact you when the intake concludes. The question presented our first decision point. Regarding boundaries, whether immediate separation would better serve therapeutic process or gradual transition might provide necessary support. I looked to Ethan, allowing him agency in this initial determination. I think it's better if you go, he said after brief consideration. Making this my responsibility from the beginning seems important. The statement reflected nascent recognition of appropriate accountability, understanding that rehabilitation required his engagement rather than maternal supervision. This insight, however preliminary, suggested potential for genuine participation beyond obligatory compliance. "I agree," I replied simply. "I'll return to gather my belongings from the cabin and check into local accommodations. We can arrange structured contact according to treatment protocols once you're settled." Dr. Chen provided practical guidance regarding communication parameters, scheduled calls following initial stabilization period, supervised visitation after treatment phase establishment, progressive contact as therapeutic progress indicated appropriateness. As Ethan prepared to follow her toward the intake area, he hesitated briefly. "Mom," he began uncertainly, "I don't know what to say that wouldn't sound hollow after everything." "Perhaps nothing needs saying yet," I suggested gently. "Let actions develop where words currently fall short." He nodded, understanding the wisdom of demonstration beyond declaration. With a final glance conveying complexity beyond simple articulation, he turned and walked through the security doors, disappearing into the treatment area that would become his home for the coming months. The drive back to our abandoned vacation cabin provided necessary space for processing the morning's extraordinary developments. What had begun as Ethan's planned final act of betrayal had transformed into potential beginning of genuine rehabilitation. The outcome remained profoundly uncertain, yet possibility existed where tragedy had seemed inevitable just hours earlier. At the cabin, I systematically gathered our belongings, separating Ethan's possessions for later delivery to the treatment center. Among his packed items, I discovered additional evidence of his original intentions: a small bottle of unmarked pills hidden in his toiletry bag, a handwritten timeline for our boat excursion concealed between clothing layers, detailed notes about insurance claim procedures tucked into his journal. These discoveries might have reignited anger or reinforced betrayal had they represented current rather than interrupted intentions. Instead, they served as concrete reminders of the intervention's necessity, tangible evidence of the moral precipice, from which Ethan had been diverted through strategic confrontation rather than punitive reaction. After securing our belongings, I contacted Detective Morrison to update her regarding developments. Our conversation focused on procedural matters: conditional suspension of evidence, submission pending rehabilitation compliance, monitoring protocols. To ensure program participation, contingency measures should therapeutic engagement prove insufficient. "This approach is unconventional," she noted professionally. "Most cases involving attempted murder proceed directly to prosecution regardless of subsequent agreements. Conventional approaches often prioritize punishment over transformation," I replied. "This situation warrants exploration of alternative possibilities." Detective Morrison neither endorsed nor criticized this perspective, maintaining appropriate professional boundaries while acknowledging the comprehensive nature of my prepared documentation should legal intervention become necessary. Her involvement provided essential accountability structure beyond private arrangement, ensuring Ethan understood the concrete consequences awaiting rehabilitation failure. By late afternoon, I had checked into a small hotel approximately 20 minutes from the treatment facility, close enough for appropriate involvement, yet sufficiently removed to establish necessary separation. The modest room provided neutral territory beyond emotionally charged environments, creating space for reflection impossible amid familiar surroundings. As evening approached, I received my first official communication from Lakeside Recovery. A brief standardized notification confirming Ethan's successful intake and initial assessment completion. The message contained no emotional content or personal details, but represented significant milestone nonetheless. Concrete implementation rather than theoretical intention. That night, alone in my hotel room, I allowed myself to fully process the emotional complexity of our situation for the first time since discovering Ethan's betrayal. The controlled focus required for strategic intervention had necessarily suppressed personal response to his planned matricide. Now, with immediate, Danger addressed and intervention initiated, the psychological impact emerged with unexpected intensity. Grief surfaced first, profound mourning for the relationship I had believed existed between us, for the moral foundation I had assumed our connection maintained despite practical challenges. This grieving acknowledged irreversible change in our fundamental relationship, recognizing that even successful rehabilitation would create something new rather than restore previous understanding. Anger followed. Not reactive rage seeking punitive satisfaction, but appropriate emotional response to profound betrayal by someone whose well-being had shaped my life decisions for decades. This anger deserved acknowledgement rather than suppression, representing healthy recognition of violated boundaries rather than destructive impulse requiring containment. Most surprisingly emerged tentative hope. Not naive optimism ignoring established patterns, but measured possibility acknowledging human capacity for genuine transformation under certain conditions. This hope wasn't expectation of specific outcome, but openness to potential development beyond current limitations. As I prepared for sleep, I reviewed the comprehensive notebook I had maintained since discovering Ethan's insurance scheme. The detailed documentation of his betrayal now sat alongside initial record of potential rehabilitation. Concrete reminder that transformation begins with accurate assessment of current reality, rather than comforting delusion or simplified narrative. The coming months would determine whether Ethan's rehabilitation represented genuine commitment or temporary compliance motivated by immediate consequences. His journey would require resources beyond my provision or control, internal capacities for honest self-examination, tolerance for uncomfortable recognition, willingness to experience natural consequences of previous actions. My role would necessarily evolve from strategic interventionist to appropriate supporter, providing structured accountability without enabling dependency, maintaining boundaries without punitive disconnection, offering opportunity without guaranteeing outcome. This evolution would require its own form of transformation, challenging established patterns within our relationship from both perspectives. What remained undetermined was whether sufficient foundation existed for genuine connection beyond therapeutic intervention. Could meaningful relationship develop from such profound betrayal? Could trust regenerate after deliberate exploitation? Could authentic attachment emerge beyond performance and calculation? These questions had no immediate answers, their resolution dependent on developments impossible to predict from current vantage point. The uncertainty itself represented necessary component of potential transformation, creating space for authentic emergence rather than predetermined outcome. As darkness settled outside my hotel window, I recognized that tomorrow would bring new challenges requiring continued vigilance and strategic response. The path forward contained potential for both progress and regression, achievement and disappointment, connection and separation. Navigating this complexity would demand resources beyond predetermined strategies or established patterns. Yet something fundamental had shifted in my orientation toward these challenges. The powerlessness I had initially experienced upon discovering Ethan's betrayal had transformed into directed agency. The victimization that might have defined my narrative had evolved into strategic engagement with difficult reality. The binary choice between naive trust and complete disconnection had expanded into nuanced exploration of conditional possibility. This evolution represented not conclusion, but beginning. Initial movement toward potential development previously unavailable within established patterns. The transformation journey had commenced not just for Ethan, but for our entire relationship system, creating possibility beyond the tragic outcome his original plan had envisioned. As I finally drifted toward sleep, one certainty emerged amid surrounding uncertainty. Tomorrow would arrive unburdened by predetermined trajectory or inevitable outcome. The path forward remained unwritten, available for creation through choices yet unmade and capacities yet undeveloped. This openness itself contained both challenge and possibility, the essential ambiguity from which genuine transformation might emerge. The methodical rhythm of establishing new routines provided essential structure during the initial phase of Ethan's treatment. Each morning began with my systematic review of case notes forwarded by Dr. Chen, clinical observations and therapeutic milestones documented with professional precision. These reports contained no emotional reassurance or optimistic projections, only factual assessment of participation levels, resistance patterns, and preliminary engagement with accountability concepts. 1 week into his residential treatment, I received the first substantial update during a scheduled consultation with Dr. Chen. The modern conference room at Lakeside Recovery Center featured neutral tones and comfortable seating arranged to facilitate professional dialogue rather than emotional comfort. Ethan has completed initial stabilization, Dr. Chen explained, referencing her detailed notes. Withdrawal from gambling behaviors has manifested through expected symptoms: irritability, sleep disturbance, compensatory planning, and periodic agitation. These responses align with typical addiction patterns rather than indicating treatment resistance. Her clinical framing provided crucial context for understanding behaviors that might otherwise suggest rejection of the rehabilitation process. The distinction between addiction symptoms and program resistance established objective framework for evaluating early progress beyond emotional interpretation. His participation in structured therapeutic activities has been consistently adequate, she continued. He completes assigned self-examination exercises and contributes appropriately during group sessions. Individual therapy has identified several key developmental factors requiring focused intervention, particularly regarding achievement orientation, disconnected from ethical consideration, and pattern attribution of negative outcomes to external circumstances. This assessment confirmed professional recognition of core issues underlying Ethan's moral compromise beyond simple gambling addiction. The therapeutic approach was addressing not merely addictive behavior, but fundamental psychological patterns that had facilitated progressive ethical deterioration. When might direct contact be therapeutically appropriate? I inquired, maintaining focus on treatment protocol rather than personal preference. We typically recommend minimum 3-week separation during initial stabilization, Dr. Chen replied. In Ethan's case, given the complex circumstances precipitating admission, we've scheduled first supervised visitation for the 4-week mark. This provides sufficient time for preliminary therapeutic engagement before introducing relationship dynamics requiring additional processing capacity. The recommendation reflected thoughtful balance between necessary separation and appropriate connection, neither premature engagement nor punitive isolation. This approach recognized both therapeutic requirements and relational context essential for comprehensive rehabilitation. Has he indicated specific requests regarding our communication? I asked, seeking insight into his perspective beyond clinical assessment. Dr. Chen consulted her notes before responding. He has expressed ambivalence rather than specific request, acknowledging potential value in direct conversation while expressing concern about capacity for authentic engagement at this stage. This self-awareness represents positive indicator regarding realistic assessment of current limitations. This insight suggested nascent recognition beyond performance orientation, acknowledgement of genuine deficits rather than strategic positioning to create favorable impression. Such recognition, however preliminary, indicated potential for authentic engagement beyond superficial compliance. During the following weeks, I established productive routine while awaiting our first scheduled visitation. Mornings focused on professional responsibilities I could manage remotely. Consulting projects for healthcare systems pursuing administrative optimization, curriculum development for hospital management training programs, advisory board participation, for medical ethics committees. These engagements provided meaningful contribution beyond reactive response to Ethan's circumstances. Afternoons typically involved practical matters related to our disrupted living arrangements, I coordinated maintenance of my primary residence through remote property management. I arranged for appropriate storage of Ethan's belongings not required during treatment. I systematically addressed administrative requirements stemming from his extended absence, insurance adjustments, utility modifications, mail forwarding protocols. Most significantly, I initiated comprehensive evaluation of our intertwined financial circumstances. Working with Eleanor Winters, we developed structured separation of previously connected resources, establishing clear boundaries between personal accounts, creating transparent documentation of previous transactions, implementing monitoring systems for potential rehabilitation requirements. This practical engagement provided essential complement to the emotional processing that continued throughout this period. Regular sessions with Dr. Victoria Landsman, a trauma specialist recommended by Lakeside's Family Support Program, created space for examining complex feelings beyond immediate crisis management. The betrayal you've experienced represents significant attachment injury, Dr. Landsman observed during our third session. Your strategic response demonstrated remarkable resilience, but addressing emotional impact remains equally important. For sustainable recovery, yours as well as Ethan's. This framing acknowledged the bidirectional nature of genuine healing, recognizing my own recovery needs beyond facilitating Ethan's rehabilitation. The perspective created permission for authentic emotional processing rather than exclusively strategic orientation. I find myself cycling between grief and cautious hope, I acknowledged, mourning the relationship I believed existed while simultaneously considering potential development beyond current reality. That ambiguity reflects appropriate response to complex circumstances, she affirmed. Premature resolution toward either absolute rejection or uncritical reconciliation would likely prove counterproductive for authentic healing. This validation of complexity created space for nuanced engagement beyond simplified narratives, neither demonizing Ethan beyond potential redemption nor minimizing his betrayal through premature forgiveness. The approach honored genuine emotional impact while maintaining openness to potential transformation. When the 4-week mark finally arrived, I prepared carefully for our first supervised visitation. The meeting would occur within Lakeside's structured environment, with therapeutic staff present to facilitate productive interaction while monitoring potential concerns. This format provided essential containment for emotions that might emerge during this initial reconnection. The family visitation room featured comfortable seating, arranged to encourage conversation while maintaining appropriate distance. Natural. Light filtered through large windows overlooking a landscaped courtyard, creating atmosphere balancing clinical necessity with human dignity. A trained counselor positioned discreetly nearby provided professional oversight without intrusive presence. When Ethan entered, I noticed immediate physical changes beyond his altered clothing. His previously manicured appearance had simplified considerably, designer eyewear replaced by basic frames, styled hair now trimmed functionally, expensive watch absent from his wrist. Most significantly, his characteristic confident posture had shifted toward more authentic presentation, less performance-oriented, more genuinely present. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice lacking its usual polished delivery. "I wasn't sure you would." "I committed to this process," I replied simply. "That includes appropriate participation in structured visitation." The response established important context, maintaining boundaries regarding unconditional emotional availability while honoring commitment to rehabilitation support. This distinction represented essential evolution from previous patterns that had inadvertently enabled dependency rather than fostering development. Our initial conversation navigated necessary adjustment to new interactional dynamics, finding appropriate balance between supportive connection and therapeutic boundaries. Ethan provided basic overview of his daily schedule, structural elements of the treatment program, and preliminary insights from therapeutic engagement. The addiction specialist explained something that made sense, he shared. making genuine eye contact rather than performing attentiveness. He described gambling as symptom rather than core problem, manifestation of deeper patterns involving control, consequence avoidance, and external validation. This observation suggested meaningful engagement beyond superficial compliance, recognition of underlying issues rather than merely symptomatic behavior. Such insight, while preliminary, indicated potential for substantive participation in therapeutic process. They've identified several developmental patterns requiring focused work, he continued, the clinical language reflecting treatment immersion, achievement orientation disconnected from ethical consideration, entitlement regarding financial resources, narrative construction that minimizes personal responsibility while maximizing external factors. The terminology demonstrated absorption of therapeutic frameworks beyond mere vocabulary adoption, conceptual understanding providing language for patterns previously operating without conscious recognition. This cognitive engagement represented essential foundation for potential behavioral change. Most striking was Ethan's measured presentation, neither performative remorse nor defensive justification, but tentative authenticity navigating unfamiliar territory. His communication contained natural hesitation, occasional verbal missteps, and appropriate uncertainty regarding complex emotional content. These characteristics contrasted sharply with his previous polished performance, suggesting potential emergence beyond calculated presentation. "I've been thinking about what happened on the boat," he said finally, approaching the central reality that had precipitated treatment. Not just getting caught, but actually facing what I had planned to do. Sometimes it still doesn't seem real, like I'm remembering someone else's intentions rather than my own. This dissociative element reflected typical response to profound moral transgression, psychological distancing, creating protective buffer against full recognition. The therapeutic process would gradually address this compartmentalization, building capacity for integrated accountability beyond immediate distress avoidance. "The hardest part," he continued, maintaining eye contact despite visible discomfort, "is recognizing that some part of me was actually capable of planning what I intended. That requires facing something fundamental about myself that's difficult to acknowledge." This observation contained genuine insight regarding necessary psychological work beyond behavioral modification. The recognition suggested potential for meaningful engagement with core issues rather than superficial compliance with program requirements. As our scheduled time concluded, the counselor provided gentle indication regarding appropriate closure. Ethan acknowledged the prompt with respectful attention rather than resistance or entitlement, another small indicator of potential adaptation to appropriate boundaries. "Would it be all right if we continued these meetings according to the treatment schedule?" he asked, the question containing neither assumption nor manipulation, but genuine inquiry regarding my willingness for continued engagement. "Yes," I replied simply. "I'll coordinate with Dr. Chen regarding appropriate frequency and format." This straightforward response maintained necessary boundaries while confirming continued participation in structured rehabilitation support. The approach provided consistency without premature emotional reassurance beyond current circumstance. As I drove back to my temporary accommodations afterward, I reflected on observable indicators from this initial interaction. Ethan's presentation suggested preliminary engagement beyond performative compliance, tentative authenticity rather than calculated impression management. The therapeutic immersion appeared to provide conceptual framework supporting potential recognition beyond established patterns. Yet I maintained realistic assessment regarding the limited significance of early indicators. Meaningful transformation would require sustained engagement beyond initial participation, integration of theoretical understanding into practical behavior, and consistent demonstration across various contexts beyond controlled therapeutic environment. The path forward remained profoundly uncertain, containing potential for both genuine development and sophisticated adaptation of familiar patterns. Navigating this ambiguity would require continued balance between supportive engagement and appropriate boundaries between recognition of potential change and acknowledgement of established history. What had become increasingly clear was that authentic transformation, Ethan's or mine, wouldn't follow predictable trajectory or conform to predetermined timeline. The process would likely include unexpected developments, periodic setbacks, and complex emotional terrain beyond rational planning or strategic management. This recognition itself represented evolution in my orientation, moving beyond control-focused approach toward engagement with emergent process containing both structure and uncertainty. The capacity to maintain this balance would prove essential for navigating the complex journey ahead, regardless of ultimate outcome regarding our relationship or Ethan's rehabilitation. The second month of Ethan's treatment brought significant shifts in both his rehabilitation process and my own parallel journey. Our bi-weekly supervised visits established a rhythm of cautious reconnection, each session revealing new dimensions of his therapeutic engagement. Where our initial meeting had focused primarily on structural elements of the program, subsequent interactions ventured into more substantive territory. During our fourth visit, the conversational dynamic changed, noticeably. Ethan appeared more settled in his physical presence, yet simultaneously less comfortable with the discussion content. A paradoxical combination suggesting engagement with challenging therapeutic material rather than superficial adaptation to residential requirements. My counselor has been focusing on what he calls origin patterns, Ethan explained, his gaze steady but voice containing subtle tension. Exploring how certain behaviors developed rather than just addressing their current manifestations. That sounds like important foundational work, I observed, maintaining supportive presence without directive interpretation. It's been... He paused, searching for accurate description rather than polished phrasing. Harder than I expected. Not just acknowledging gambling addiction or financial deception, but really examining the underlying patterns that made those behaviors possible. This distinction reflected meaningful therapeutic engagement beyond symptom management, addressing root psychological structures rather than merely modifying visible behaviors. Such foundational work represented essential prerequisite for sustainable transformation rather than temporary behavioral compliance. One recurring theme involves our financial relationship, he continued, visible discomfort intensifying. The pattern of request and rescue that characterized most of our adult interactions. This observation indicated developing insight regarding our mutual participation in problematic relational dynamics, recognition extending beyond individual pathology, to include systemic patterns requiring bilateral examination. The perspective suggested evolution beyond simplistic victim-perpetrator framework toward more complex understanding of interdependent behaviors. My counselor suggested something difficult to hear, Ethan said, maintaining eye contact despite evident struggle. He proposed that your consistent financial rescues, however well-intentioned, ultimately enabled my progressive detachment from natural consequences. That your readiness to solve problems I created may have inadvertently contributed to my sense that problems could always be solved through external intervention rather than personal accountability. This insight represented significant therapeutic progress, recognition of systemic contribution to individual pathology without minimizing personal responsibility for specific choices. The observation invited mutual examination rather than blame. Displacement, creating potential for relationship evolution beyond established patterns. That perspective aligns with my own recent reflections, I acknowledged, validating the insight without defensive response. My consistent prioritization of your short-term comfort over long-term development likely contributed to patterns that ultimately served neither of us effectively. This mutual recognition created foundation for potential relationship recalibration, establishing shared understanding of problematic dynamics rather than isolated focus on individual behaviors. The perspective invited consideration of how future interactions might evolve beyond established patterns, regardless of ultimate relationship configuration. As these therapeutic insights deepened, practical implementation extended beyond residential treatment into concrete financial restructuring. Working with specialized counselors from both Lakeside's addiction recovery program and financial rehabilitation services, we established comprehensive framework for addressing Ethan's substantial gambling debts and financial mismanagement. The why approach rejected both enabling bailout and punitive abandonment, instead creating structured accountability system balancing consequences with development opportunity. Each creditor received partial immediate payment through carefully managed trust established with Eleanor Winters, followed by scheduled increments tied directly to Ethan's documented progress in both addiction recovery and ethical rehabilitation. This arrangement created natural accountability beyond therapeutic oversight, establishing direct connection between rehabilitation engagement and financial resolution. The structure provided motivation beyond abstract commitment, linking concrete progress with tangible outcomes through transparent mechanisms rather than subjective evaluation. Most significantly, the framework required Ethan's direct participation in creditor communication, acknowledging obligations, explaining circumstances, and negotiating resolution parameters under appropriate supervision. This approach replaced previous pattern of maternal intervention with guided personal accountability, establishing foundation for independent responsibility beyond treatment environment. Talking directly with people I've harmed through my financial decisions has been, surprisingly, Ethan hesitated during our 6th supervised visit, searching for precise description, clarifying, facing actual individuals affected by my choices rather than abstract concepts of debt or obligation. This observation suggested developing empathic capacity beyond self-referential perspective, recognition of impacts extending beyond personal consequences to include effects on others previously conceptualized primarily as resource sources or obstacles. Such perspective expansion represented a central component of ethical rehabilitation beyond behavioral modification. Parallel to Ethan's treatment progression, my own journey continued through both professional engagement and psychological processing. Regular sessions with Dr. Landsman provided structured space for examining complex emotions, emerging as initial crisis management transitioned toward longer-term adaptation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.